All right, Peanut Gallery, let's do some heckling.
All right, so I've touched on this topic a couple of times, but it's becoming very common where you have, I guess, individuals, wrestlers who are in partnerships with, who are in a promotion that has partnerships with other promotions. And sometimes these individuals go for a title and win a title. And I have very mixed feelings about this just in general. And I'm going to go through some pros and cons with regards to the merit of doing this, because I think that there are pros and there are certainly cons with it as well.
Yep.
Obviously, the reason, and what I'm referring to is are people who are signed with one company who go to other companies and then they win the titles. And then they keep those titles for a while, and sometimes they win multiple titles just in different companies. And I'm going to first talk about the pros. The pros, obviously, you have the exposure angle.
Yep.
And I think that is extremely important, especially when it comes to promotions like AAA. AAA is very well known for these cross-promotional titles because they're trying to reach a certain audience that otherwise would not know.
Right.
That promotion.
That is the biggest reason why they do this.
Yes.
Especially even back in the day with Ultimo Dragon winning a bunch of titles. I mean, he had a collection of 20 different championships. He was draped in gold. Number one, it looks visually cool.
Yeah.
And also, when a person is popular enough and they get them, why wouldn't you put it on somebody who gets eyeballs on the product? That's the entire business model of this. You want people to watch.
Right. And so that's kind of the primary reason, I think. And I think a good secondary reason, too, is that then the title also feels more important because more people are getting the attention from outside the promotion.
Right.
They want to go in and they want to see what it's all about and they want to win the title.
That's why I love AEW and cross-promoting like the Ring of Honor titles. It's keeping that fresh on a much larger level.
Ring of Honor is essentially a puppet of AEW.
Well, yeah, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
It's the same thing.
Yeah.
It's like when NXT went to WWE when they had the NXT champion on the line there.
Right.
It was exposing people to a product that they may or may not necessarily, have seen before. Right. It could be good or bad, but there you go.
And I think it's good for the companies in terms of being able to put the title on someone without pay, and paying them a little bit differently. Rather, they're under contract with another company.
Right.
And they don't have to foot bills for things that maybe they can't afford.
I think overall the whole thing about title collectors is a mutually beneficial thing, just all the way around.
But if you want to move on to the second, I mean, essentially all I have are pictures of people with multiple titles. But let's talk about some of the cons with this as well, because I think that there are some cons, and I think the first con is that when you would defend a title at another promotion's pay-per-view, I guess it kind of feels out of place, so to speak. It doesn't make it puts emphasis on a product that is not of that home brand, and I think that can be detrimental, especially in the case where you already have a title. Like for example, the women's champion, the Reina's champion, being defended at Impact Rebellion. I think what it did is that it took away a spot that someone else could have occupied.
If it was on a regular show, I probably would have been more accepting to it, because now I understand what you're saying. Because this is a pay-per-view, and with a company like Impact Wrestling that does a limited amount of pay-per-view time because they don't have pay-per-views every month, I could see this rubbing people the wrong way.
And I think the other thing that I want to mention too is that if you have the title on someone from a different promotion, it kind of implies that the people that you have already signed aren't good enough for that title. I think that it really gives off that vibe as well.
I could see that. Now, some promotions almost strictly do outside signings like Austin Aries.
Yeah.
Like there are people that will book like multiple dates with a promotion, but they're not necessarily signed with the promotion.
And I think that it would rub people the wrong way too if they saw, oh, this person is our champion, but this person can't be seen. This person is kind of signed with a different company.
Great segue.
Yeah, great segue for Kenny Omega.
You have the world champion.
Yeah, with Kenny Omega. He held the Mega Champion for a long-ass time.
Yep.
And it seemed like the Mega Champion, number one, the Mega Champion was on someone who was in a different country.
Yep.
Someone who was above and beyond any of the wrestlers that they could have possibly built. And you just didn't have anyone really viable in AAA as a result, because it just seemed like, oh, here's Kenny Omega, and he is just like this megastar, and then everyone else is like, oh.
I will say one thing in contrast of that is when he does lose to somebody, if he faced like Elio Del Vikingo, for instance, our current champion, I think that would have elevated Vikingo up even more.
To that mega star, but he didn't have the opportunity to do so.
Given the circumstances of, the pandemic, and then also Kenny Omega relinquished the title because he was hurt.
And I think what we're seeing now is we're kind of seeing these titles revert back to their original promotions. I think and I can still see those partnerships existing, but really a lot of the titles that you see now are back with people who are actually signed to the promotion which they are a part of.
I will say one thing in that, I mean, right now, because Kenny Omega got hurt. Well, he was hurt. He had a couple of injuries, but I think the pandemic was a big factor in having these belt collectors because you have a huge crutch with nobody in the stands.
With people who are, so you have to get more eyes on your television screens, and your rosters might be limited if you're an international promotion.
And if somebody's like a mega champion like Kenny Omega was back then, that gets people to watch that pay-per-view more. And you're right, they're starting to revert back to, we have the roster, now we have the people, and people respond to this better. Let's keep this, because, like you said, somebody could get hurt. You have to relinquish the title. You have no control over that.
Right. You have no control over that person's dates. You have no control.
Kenny Omega was wrestling everywhere.
Right.
And he was getting hurt, and he was getting more hurt and more hurt and more hurt.
Right.
And it's like, okay, well, there has to be a breaking point at some time.
Right. And so those are some of the biggest cons that I see with these belt collector types. I mean, overall, I don't think it's a bad idea, but there definitely are bits and pieces of it where you can say, yeah, I can see how it affects maybe the morale of the locker room, for example, without having that face of the company there.
Right.
Not having as much control as you would have liked for these titles in the first place. You don't have that control over the trajectory of these titles, the dates that they're available, and that sort of thing.
Right.
And belt collector's been around even since before the pandemic.
Yeah.
And I think that they're going to continue. But I mean, I guess it might be just a word of warning for promotions. Don't get too dependent on these outsiders essentially coming in and having your titles, because it could seem like that your title would be held hostage by maybe even another promotion.
Austin Aries did that when he was a belt collector. He held the world title hostage in a way. I think with Matt Cardona, because I think this is a great thing, and I really wanted to talk about this with your topic. I was really excited because Matt Cardona almost transcends promotions.
Yeah, he does.
Because he has made such a huge impact overall. And I think Kenny Omega is another great example of that, where he is almost above that thing.
But he's still signed with Impact, and he's now holding the NWA World Heavyweight Championship.
But he also has like 3 other headline titles.
Yes.
Now, with Cardona, they're very limited on him wrestling in a full-time capacity.
Yes.
They're doing him for maybe marquee matches if there was like a big pop, because they had him defend that digital media champion against Guido Maritado from ECW, which, once again, marquee match.
Right.
They were in 2300 Arena. They had to do it. And with Cardona being the NWA World Heavyweight Champion and maybe not being the world champion all the way across the board,
right,
it's actually bringing up the digital media champion.
Right.
It's giving it more legitimacy,
right.
I think, overall. Depending on what you do with the belt collector gimmick is where it is, but you got to be careful.
Yes, you do.
We've seen it successful.
And we've seen it very unsuccessful.
Or to the detriment. I think Kenny Omega's thing overall was a detriment to his health.
Yeah, it was also, in my opinion, him holding the title as long as it did was a detriment to even just AAA as a brand. I think they had to rebuild that heavyweight division because the mega division. Because,
they did not know that there was going to be a fucking pandemic.
Well, I know, but he held it for like 300 days before then too.
That's the thing though, and we're going to be talking about that on my segment. That is a standard for AAA, or actually Mexican championships as a whole. They always have longer reigns.
Yeah.
Always have longer
speaking
reigns.
of which, I'm pretty much done with my topic.
All right.
But why don't we transition into yours after the break?
Yeah, absolutely.